Okay, Tov. Today's daf is Chav Ches. We start on Chav Zayin Amid Beis. Mitzo kosher bekis be'arniki b'tabas. So these are all kinds of simanim, by which the shliach or the baal could identify this is his get, because we assume that since the get is inside a kli and it never fell out of the kli, and he owns the kli, therefore the get is the original get, and it's written lishma. Oshem mitzo ben kelov, or he finds the get amongst his kelim in his house, and in all these cases he has a simon. It's not only just a regular simon that might be doraisa, might be drabanan, but it's a simon muvak, which is certainly doraisa, and therefore fil izman meruba, even if a period of time has passed since the loss of the get, kosher. Itmar, Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Halacha shalosh adam sham. The shir of zman, we had a number of different shitas amongst the Tanoim. When is it considered li'alter, and when is it considered lizman meruba? And we're going to paskin like that. Mandi Amru says that lo shah adam sham. There was no one there who was in that place when the shliach passed by with the get. And that was the Yesh Omrim that we had on Daf Chav Zayin and Beis. Rabbi Rechana Amar, he on the other hand, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel, Paskins Halacha Shlo Avar Adam Sham. So that means that the Shir Zman Li'alter is that no one passed there in that place where the shliach and could have possibly dropped a get. And that reflects the shita of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar amongst the Tanoim. Lema mar halacha kimar. Why did each one say the shir of Zman of Li'alter? Mar, Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, could have said halacha kimar, could have said halacha ki yesh omrim. He didn't have to specify how much time it is. And Mar and Rabbi Bar Chana could have said halacha kimar like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. And where it says mishum da'af chelahu, because there were different gersos and different traditions amongst the Tanoim, and some had Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar had the shir of Shalosha Adam Sham, and the Yesh Omrim had the shir of Lo Avar Adam Sham. So therefore, to be absolutely clear, the two Amoraim, whether it's Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel or Rabbi Archana and so forth, would specify exactly how much time it was to the shir of Liachar Zman. Mitzvah b'chafisa o b'dluskima kosher. So the Gemara asks, "My chafisa, Omer Rabbi Archana chamas ktana." A small pouch, like a node, what we call in Hebrew. My dluskima, delika disave, which is a large kind of a sack that the Zkanim used to put all their afatzim into. And this leads us to the Mishnah here on Daf Chav Ches, which is our main focus for today's daf. Hamevi get the nicho zaken ochol. This sugya addresses the issue of what's called cheskas chayim. Do we assume that if a person is alive, and even if he's very old or he's ill, he still is alive, such that the shliach who brings a get, let's say from far away, from Medina Sayyam, can deliver the get? And the Mishnah establishes no saying lo b'cheskas shukayim, even though he nicho zaken ochole, we can assume a cheskas chayim, and a cheskas chayim is based on the Gemara in Chulin on Daf Yud Aleph that chazak is doraisa, and the Gemara Bab Metzia on Daf Lamed Tes also seems to indicate that chazaka is doraisa, cheskas chayim is doraisa. Otherwise, we could not be mater and eshesish based on chazaka. And the Gemara in Chulin derives this from Psukim, mostly in the parasha of Beis Hamenuga, that there's a chazaka that which was the situation before continues to be the same situation now. And as we'll see in the sugya, that's only a chazaka on the past, meaning that if the shliach left him alive, then the premise is he's still alive. Ubas Yisrael Nesul Kohen. Ubas Yisrael cannot eat truma unless she's married to a Kohen. And now V'holach Ba'alim Dinas Hayam. He went out very far, and the question is, can she continue to eat truma based on the chazaka that he's still alive? And the Mishnah Paskins Ochels B'truma Cheskes Shukayim. A third case of Cheskes Kayim, Hasholech Hatosim Dinas Hayam. Person sent a shliach to bring his carbon chatos. He himself is very far away, and we can't bring the chatos if he died, because there are 5 chatos hamesos from which we derive with halacha l'Moshe Sinai that those chatos, if they're one of those 5 categories, for example, mesu ba'aleha, then it's lemisa, and you can't be makriven on the mizbeach. But here makriven also b'cheskes shukayim. And the Gemara is going to try to explain why we need these 3 cases. Each one is an additional chiddush. Now, the shliach left the Baal Zaken or Chol in the Reish of our Mishnah, and the Mishnah establishes that we don't have to be choshesh that maybe in the interim period the Baal died, but rather the shliach could deliver the get. Amar Rav lo shanu. When does this apply? That hiniach es Baal Zaken or Chol, the shliach can assume he's still alive and be most of the get liishto b'cheskes chayim. Ella, it only applies in a zaken shelo yigil l'gvurus. He's less than 80 years. And if he's past gvuros, then we don't assume that he's still alive. And here we have machlokes. Is it that, number 1, he gil l'gvuros, number 2, he's also a chola, and the combination thereof undermines the cheskes chayim. Now, what does the Mishnah mean? What does Rava mean when he says Ela Zaken? He left him as Zaken, Shaloi Gil Gvuros. What would be the shear of a Zaken? And the answer to that is 60 years old. And all this is in the Mishnah in Avos in the 5th chapter. And now he says Sharov Cholim L'chaim. Aval Zaken Shigil Gvuros, or a Gosei Sharov Gosin Lemisa Lo. So if he is a Chola and he's not Gvuros, then we assume he'll survive and he's still alive. Most Cholim will survive. However, if he is a Goses or a Zaken Shigil Gvuros, and again, some say it's a Zaken Shigil Gvuros, and at the same time he's a chola, then we apply the principle of rov gosin lemisa, or in the case of a zaken shegil gvuros, according to Rav, again, the Gemara is going to reject this, but in the Havamina of the Sugya, the cheskes chayim is undermined, and it's not reliable. And therefore the get cannot be delivered. Abaye asks a kash on Rava from a brisa. The brisa says, maybe get, if a person brings a get from Medinas Hayam, v'nicho zaken, and he left a Baal when he was a zaken, afilu ben mea shana, even if he's over 100, no sim lo b'cheskes shukayim, and certainly if he's only 80, we don't assume that he died tiyufta, and therefore the Gemara at this point raises this as an objection to Rav. The Gemara offers a possible way of defending Rav and reconciling him with this brisa of afilu ben mea shana. Perhaps Rav is correct. Once he reaches the age of 80, we have to be choshesh lemisa. But if he passes the age of 80 and he's already 90 years old, or even if he's 100 years old, then keva de iflag, apparently this person is not a normal profile of an individual who dies, but rather iflag. He might live forever and ever, so to speak. I'm just using that as an expression. And therefore, we're not going to be choshesh shema meis. And that's what the Bryce had in mind when it said, afilu ben me'eshana nosin lo b'cheska shu chayim. Rami le abai le Rabbi asked the kasha to Rabbi. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, hamevi get v'nicho zokin ochole nosin lo b'cheska shu chayim. And we rely on a cheskas chayim uriminu. I'm going to ask you a kasha from a stira from another brisa, which talks about a bas Yisrael who in and of herself cannot eat truma, but if she's married to a Kohen and she doesn't have children from a previous marriage, then she's allowed to eat truma. Now she's afraid that maybe her husband might die, or maybe, he's in a far off place. And since she doesn't have any children, therefore she falls for yibum. So the husband, in order to undermine the zikas yibum, he gives her chalitza. He gives her get so that she shouldn't have to require chalitza. And of course, he has to give a get when he's healthy. And he says, he's giving it 1 hour before his death. In other words, the get is given in a t'nai of liachar zman of 1 hour before he dies, so that she'll be a grusha and not a shomeres yomim. She doesn't fall for yibum. And the Brisa says, Asur lecha b'trum miyad. We're afraid that maybe the husband would die in an hour from now. So every hour might be that hour before his death. And therefore, since we're choshesh lemisa, what we call shema yamos, therefore she cannot eat truma. Now, before we go on, there was a point that I wanted to make. Just 1 second. Oh, yeah. I think this is it. Yeah, with regard to goses, Tosfos, not here, but in Masechet Kiddushin Daf Ayin Chesamid Beis, says that Rov gosin lemisa, and therefore with Choshesh, when the shliach comes to give the get, that maybe the goses died already. But the goses himself could be megarish his wife. It's only that after this time period that lapsed since the minui shlichus as a goses, until the time that the shliach delivered the get, he may have died. But if we know he's still alive and he's a goses, then the get could be kosher. However, the Rashba quotes Rabbeinu Yoel Mibuna, who holds that a goses cannot be megarish's wife. So he's going to have to explain this Gemara of Rov gosin lemisa. Why does he have to say Rov gosin lemisa? Even if he's not lemisa, even if he's alive, he can't deliver the get. And the answer is that the get was delivered over to the hands of the shliach before this person became a goses. The shliach didn't get a chance to even take the get and head out on his journey until the Baal Haget became a goses. And therefore, our Mishnah is saying that he cannot, or actually it's not the Mishnah, it's the statement of Rambam. He cannot deliver the get b'cheskas chayim. but rather we assume he's a goses or he died, and therefore he cannot deliver the get. But if the halacha was rov gosin l'chaim, then he could deliver the get, because at the time that he was appointed as a shliach and received the get, the Baal was not a goses. Okay, now we get back to Abaye's kasha, which he asked to Rav. On the one hand, our Mishnah assumes and is predicated on the cheskes chaim. On the other hand, in the case of Gittin shachas kodem misasi, she cannot eat truma, and we assume that maybe he died. Omalei, so Rabbah says to Abaye, truma Gittin karamis. In the case of truma, it's no big deal to be machmir and say maybe he died, so she won't eat truma, she'll eat chulin. That's called truma efshar. But get is lo efshar. If you're going to be machmir and you're assuming that the Baal might have died, then she will not be able to receive the get. So whenever a person sends a get from Medina Sayyam, you always have the problem of aguna. So we don't have that luxury of being machmir and saying, well, maybe he died. Now, I think the word aguna here should be interpreted in terms of yibum. I'm not 100% sure. Give me a second here. Okay, I'm not finding that now. Anyway, but Abaye comes back and he asks a kasha, Romi Truma, Tanan, Bas Yisrael, and Asula Kohen. Our Mishnah assumes that there's a cheskes chaim, and therefore she can continue eating truma under the assumption that her husband's still alive, even though halach ba'elam dinas hayam, even though he's very far away. So she doesn't know for sure if he's still alive, and yet ocheles b'truma b'cheskes shukayim uraminhu. And now I'll ask you the kasha from the price that we quoted before. Hareze gitech sha'achas kodem nisaso asura lechol b'truma miyad. So we're assuming that this might be the hour before his death, and therefore she cannot eat truma. And yet our Mishnah allows her to eat truma, even though her Baal went to Medina Sayyam, and we're not sure that he's alive. So if we apply the Cheskes Chaim principle to the case of Sha'achas Kodem Misaso, then she should be allowed to eat truma. Amar Rav Adam Rav Yitzchak Shani Hasam Sharei Asra Olav Sha'achas Kodem Misaso. So what is the answer here of Rav Ada Berei de Rav Yitzchak? We're saying the following. As a general rule, Uki Gavra B'cheskes Chaim. We're not choshesh that maybe he died. But the Brisa is talking about a case where he's Megar Shashachas Kodem Misaso. That's already a different story, because he already generates an Isur of eating truma shachas kodem misasa. So therefore, even before he dies, she's already asura lechol truma, because the get is chal while he's still alive, an hour before he dies. So the isur of eating truma is not a contradiction and doesn't undermine the cheskes chaim. But in our Mishnah, she doesn't become asura until he actually dies, and then we can apply the principle of cheskes chaim. Maskif lo Rav Papa, the mai deiu mayis bereisha. How do we know that he's the first one to die, and then she becomes asura lechel b'truma because she's a bas Yisrael? Dilma ihi mayis bereisha. Maybe she'll die first, and she'll never be asura lechel b'truma. So it must be that the reason why she's asur to truma is because we're choshesh that he will die before her, and we're not going to apply the principle of cheskes chaim. We'll be choshesh lemisa. Elo Omar Abaye, the answer to this question is not that of Rav Ada bar Rav Yitzchak, but rather there's a much more fundamental answer. Lokasha. Ha Rabbi Meir de lo chayish lemisa, ha Rabbi Yehuda de chayish lemisa. This nan we're going to learn from a Mishnah in Masechet Trumos, I believe. Just 1 second. Sorry. I see. He tells you it's in a lot of different places. Okay, we had it before on Daf Chaf Hey, and this Mishnah that we're going to learn is a question of truma, and the Mishnah. Well, actually, there's a girsa problem. It should say Desanya. It says Desnan. In any event, this is the price that was brought on Daf Chafei. That records a machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Now, the machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is not about Chayshina Lemisa, but rather about how are you feeling?
Okay, I'm trying to sleep maybe.
Yeah.
What time do you leave?
Oh, I wrote that to you 8:15.
And then you come back 9:30?
Yeah, I wrote it to you. Just I'm in the middle of the shia. Sorry. Right. The machlok shin Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is about something called chayshinon lebekias hanod. So what does that mean? Tisnan halokeach. This is Rabbi Meir that we're studying. Halokeach yayim mibein hakusim. Kusim are not reliable for hafresh trumas and maisros, and now he wants to drink the wine, but he hasn't a kli that's tahor. So how can he drink the wine and not put trumas and maisros into a kli tameh? Omer, he declares shnei lugim, 2 lugim out of 100 shani asid lahafresh, because beinan in truma is 2%. Harain true. Now, Asara, another 10 lugim, are Maserisha. Now, once he takes off the 10 lugim, he's left with 9 lugim, and now he has to give another 10% and be mafresh as Maser Sheni, Tisha, Maser Sheni. So 9 out of 90 is Maser Sheni. Umechel, and he can be mechal the kedusha ma'aser sheni on mos v'shosam divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir is going to rely on breira, and later on he's going to be mafresh the truma and the maser sheni. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon Osrim. Why? Because they're afraid shemi baka note, which means that he may not ever get a chance to be mafresh, the maser, etc., the truma maser, because the entire barrel of wine spilled, and then lemafreya, what he drank was teva. And the Gemara, in the name of Abaye, is going to assume that just like Rabbi Meir on the one hand and the other Tanoim on the other hand are arguing about whether Shemi Yibaka knows, so too they would argue about whether or not Chayshina Lemisa. So the Tan of our Mishnah is not Choshish Lemisa, and he holds like Rabbi Meir, which is okay because Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. And you could give the get, but Cheskes Shuchayim, the Tan of the Bryce, on the other hand, holds like the other Tanoim, Rabbi Yehuda, etc., because they hold that Chayshina and Shemi Yibaka Nod.